Once more give rise to bodhicitta, listen with bodhicitta. So now we come to this quotation from the Sutra Advice to the King, advice given by Buddha Shakyamuni. Great king likes calling someone out by name, saying Chinle. Imagine that from the four directions, four great mountains. So this is called what we call in the scriptures an example with three proofs. It's not the best translation, but it's a specific type of example. It's not like a literal example saying this really is going to happen or has happened, but it's an example given to illustrate a point in a certain way. So imagine that from the four directions, four great mountains, solid, core, indestructible, unfissured, extremely hard, and quite undamaged. She's discussing some spelling variations in the text. Generally, Kyabje Rinpoche's writings are extremely correct with so few spelling mistakes. And there's they're huge masses touching the sky. Imagine if they were to fall back onto the earth. So it seems there are a few typos, a few spelling mistakes in Kyabje Rinpoche's writings, but of course those are not the errors of Kyabje Rinpoche himself, but the errors of the scribes who copied the teachings out. So this is more discussion about a different spelling of these words. The words translated as solid to the core, indestructible, and so on. Really tall, their peaks touching the sky. Imagine they were to fall back into the earth. If the mountains were to collapse into the ground, they would crush everything on the ground, right? All the plants and trees, along with all the animals and other living creatures, would be completely pulverized. It would not be an easy matter of using speed to run away or strength to push them back or wealth to pay ransom or special substances, mantras and medicines to avert them. Like in past years, it was somewhere in Egypt or somewhere, a huge meteorite fell from the sky and made a huge crevice in the ground, completely pulverized everything that it landed on. I think that was at some point in the 90s. So there was a meteorite, like a dead star, that had fallen from the sky onto Earth. Sorry, the microphone wasn't on. So actually, if you look in the BBC archives, you'll see this. I think it was in 94, 5 or 6. A huge meteorite was headed for Earth. And if it were to hit Earth, it was going to pulverize our Earth, break it into 2 or 3 pieces. Everything would be destroyed. But NASA or American scientists, also the Beijing scientists, realized that this was going to happen. It was going to the meteorite was scheduled to collide with Earth in the middle of the night. And this came onto the news, and people were terrified that they were, approaching the end of the world, the end of their lives. I remember this happening and writing about it in my diary. People were expecting that, the world was coming to an end. Like they say that dinosaurs were made extinct by some meteorite striking the world and making the world, like their world, inhabitable, right? So something like that was expected to happen back then. So this is all to say that this can happen. The example here are those 4 great mountains falling, collapsing and pulverizing everything on the Earth. This we can think similarly of like a meteorite, like I just mentioned, hitting the Earth. These things can happen, right? And if something happens, like if a meteorite were heading for the Earth, there would be nowhere to run to, right? Absolutely nowhere to run to. We can also think of these major earthquakes like we had in 2015 here and in other countries as well. So a note on this, up in Humla and anyway, these areas in the Himalayas, we're living in an earthquake-prone area. And many of you here are in the process of building houses or will build houses. So it's important to build stable houses, to build houses with strong structures. Otherwise, in a few years when there's another earthquake, if you build a house without proper pillars and so on, then the house will just crumble in the earthquake and a lot of people could die. So in the past, during Buddha's time, there's a person called Pakyebo, a king, who waged war far and wide. So there was someone called Pakyebo who waged war, killed a lot of, caused the death of many people and caused a lot of destruction. And Shariputra, one of the disciples, asked Buddha Shakyamuni what would be the karmic ripening for this person. Buddha saw with his wisdom that in the future, this person in this and that year, the sole of his foot would be pierced by a thorn or something, and that would be the cause of his death. And Pakyebo heard this, and he was filled with fear. And from that point onwards, he did everything he could to avoid this prophecy from bearing fruit, right? He stayed inside. He basically avoided any possible opportunity for going outside and letting his feet get pierced by thorns, or what have you. So he's passed year after year inside. living inside in the dark, wanting to escape or outdo Buddha's prophecy. So since he was the king, he was okay. He had people to attend to his needs. He didn't actually need to go outside if he didn't want to. But then one day... Okay, so actually Buddha's prophecy was specifically that his foot would be pierced by a bone. So the king lived year after year in his building, trying to avoid this happening. And then one day, the king, a bird was flying past the palace, holding a bone. He dropped the bone and it fell. Maybe it fell through the window, or the king had stepped outside just to get some sun on a balcony or something. And anyway, at that very moment, a bird dropped a bone, and it fell onto the king's foot, pierced his foot, and that was then the cause for his death. Shortly after that, he died. So there's no way to escape. There was no way for him to escape his karma, right? Nowhere for him to run. Yeah, so after years of living inside, the king had just felt so desperate to see the sky, so he just stepped out of his rooms, looked up into the sky, was enjoying looking into the sky and feeling the sun as his skin. At that moment, a bird flew past, dropped a bone, it pierced his foot, and he died. So this can happen, right? Like a kind of small, specific condition can befall us and cause a sudden death. So if we can't escape those sorts of causes and conditions for our death, there's no way we could escape death if something dramatic like this happened, right? Like a meteorite striking the earth or the mountains collapsing. So great king, in the same way, there are 4 great dangers that will occur. What are these 4? They're old age, sickness, death, and decline. There is no way you can escape these. Old age, sickness, and death. There's no escape from these. We recite these 4 streams of suffering, birth, old age, sickness, and death every day, right? When we recite the dedication prem, through this merit may all tame innocence, freed from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, and so on, right? We recite these words and other words of the teachings every day, but do we actually really think about them, think about their meaning and take them to heart? These 4 great dangers, the 4 streams of suffering, birth, old age, sickness, and death, there's no one who can escape these, right? No ordinary being who can escape these. We are all subject to impermanence, to karma, the impermanence and karma that causes our old age, sickness, and death. If we want to gain freedom from these sufferings of old age, sickness, and death, birth, old age, sickness, and death, the only way to do it is to practice the Dhamma. That is the only route to freedom from these sufferings. Even the great gods like Brahma, Indra, and so on are subject to these sufferings. So until we attain liberation from samsara through practicing the Dhamma, there will be no freedom from these dangers. You might be in the prime of youth, say in your 20s or 30s, handsome and fit, healthy, with a radiant complexion, capable. And feel like you have nothing to worry about. But as the days and years pass by, your hair will start to turn grey, you'll lose your strength, your body will start to fall apart. Aging is inevitable. Decline will destroy your... So it says here, old age will destroy your youth like that. Sickness will destroy your good health. Slowly your hair will go grey, your teeth will start to fall out. You will start to age and decline. So there's a story here about two friends. One of them said, when I get old, I want to practice the Dharma, I want to apply myself to the Dharma. It's like a kind of a fable. And he says, one of them says, so when I get old, when I start getting old, you have to send me a message and tell me now is the time to practice the Dharma. You're getting old, so now you need to practice. So this man went on living, and then he became old, his hair started going grey, his teeth started falling out, he became weak and frail. And then he arrived eventually at the moment of death, but he still hadn't practiced a day of Dharma. And then he encountered his friend and he said, now here I am on my deathbed. Why didn't you send me a reminder? You didn't send me a message telling me to practice. He said, I did send you a message. I sent you many messages. First of all, your hair turned grey. That was one message. Second, your teeth started falling out. That was the second message. Thirdly, you became frail and weak. That was the third message. You didn't listen to my messages. So when our body changes, our hair goes grey and so on, these are all signs, right? Signs and messages to us. Get a move on. Apply yourself to practice. Inevitably, we will age, our body will decline, and we will arrive at the point of death. And then death will destroy your life. Death will take away our life. Will steal away our life force. It will not be an easy matter of using speed to run away from them or strength to push them back, like a wrestler crushing someone on the floor. That is not possible with the Lord of Death. You can't bribe death with money or power. Like Mike Tyson, this world-famous wrestler. Even if you're strong as him, you cannot wrestle with the Lord of Death. You can't use wealth to pay a ransom. Yeah, if you're wealthy, sure, you can pay for medicine, but there's only so much medicine can do. Maybe you can keep yourself alive in ICU for a few extra days, but prolong your life for a few extra days. But no amount of money can bribe death. So the only way to overcome death is through practice, through attaining accomplishment, through practice, and arriving at the state of deathlessness, the transcendental state of deathlessness, the state which we call the Vidyadhara of immortality, the Vidyadhara with mastery over life, as attained by great practitioners of the past. Rinpoche mentioned a few names like Vimala Mitra and so on, who manifested this immortal state of the Vidyadhara with life, with mastery over life. Even if somehow these days, I think Rinpoche is saying these days there's talk of like new medicine which can prolong one's life. But so what? Even if you manage to live up to 150, still, okay, after you live for a few extra years, but still at the end you're going to face death. So whether you live for a long time or a short time, at the end of the day you have to die. And also about living old, if you live for many years, like up to 100 or more than 100, but if you're very weak and frail and inept, you have to rely on a nurse, be nursed all around night and day. What's the point of being alive if you're that unwell, if you're that frail? It's appalling, right? It's a horrible way to live. No use to live like that. What's the point in living into your 80s, 90s if you're no more than like a living corpse, if you're that frail and infirm? Better to die, actually, don't you think? Because in any case, at the end of the day, we all have to face death. So, great king, let us take an example. Imagine the king of animals, the lion. A lion is the king of animals. It's so powerful. when you watch a lion hunt, say, wolves or rabbits, it just sinks its teeth into their flesh, and in a single bite it's sort of ground up their bones. And so imagine the king of animals, the lion, going into the midst of a herd of antelope and seizing one. He can dominate the animals as it pleases. A great king, in the same way, when the Lord of Death impales you on his torch. In the past there was in the ancient lands there was a punishment meted out by the kings where someone would be impaled from their anus all the way up to the crown of their head. So imagine when the Lord of Death impales you on his torch. This kind of appalling punishment is being given as an example here for being seized by the Lord of Death. Your pride will desert you at that point. You'll have no protector, no refuge, no relatives to defend you, no friends. Your joints will become lax, so your bones will fall apart, your flesh and blood will dry up, and so on. You'll be parched by thirst. Your countenance will change. So these days you see some people who are on their deathbeds, their face becomes contorted and twisted. Your arms and legs will flail about. Unable to accomplish any task, your strength will fail you. Even if someone spoon feeds you, you cannot take the food. Your body will be stained with spittle, snot, urine and vomit. You wet yourself, you shit yourself in bed. You become so weak you can't even swallow your own spit. There's a story of a powerful politician who ended up in ICU, was so weak they couldn't swallow their own spittle, and actually they choked to death their own spittle. The nurses weren't able to clear his throat fast enough. So this is how it is. When the body becomes this weak and frail, then you can die just by choking on your own spittle, for instance. Your sense organs cease to function. Your sense functions of eye, ear, taste and so on degenerate, so that even if you are able to eat, you can't taste anything, you can't see, you can't hear, you can barely breathe. Your breath is like rasping, making this rasping sound as you struggle to breathe in and out. The doctors will give you up. Traditionally, like Tibetan medical doctors, it's different now with modern doctors, but Tibetan medical doctors, they would not stay at the dying person's bedside once their breath started rasping, and once the doctor saw the patient was a few minutes away from death, the doctor would actually get up and leave the room. I think Rinpoche is saying because maybe there's the idea that their own vitality or something would degenerate. Anyway, there's this tradition of the doctor would get up and leave a few minutes before the person would die. So these days doctors, modern Western doctors, stay by the often stay by the dying person's bedside until they draw their last breath. But anyway, that's about the doctors will give you up. You will lie on your bed for the last time. So now we're on page 85. So if you're dying at home in your ordinary bed, you've lied down on this bed so many times, but now this is the last time you'll ever do it. So this is what is meant when it said your last bed, or lying down for the last time. It means you're lying down to die. Full of terror at the Lord of Death, you'll be overpowered by your misfortune. Your breath will cease, your mouth will gape, your teeth will be clenched tight. You'll wish you could practice some charity or generosity. You'll think, oh, if only I had been generous, if only I had maintained discipline. When you arrive at this point, the moment of death, you might think, oh, if only I had been generous, if only I had given away my possessions, if only I had maintained discipline, and so on. So I think that's what this line is referring to. As a result of your deeds, you will go from one existence to the next. As a result of the karma you've performed, you will take rebirth. So no matter how powerful, no matter how powerful you are, and especially those who have done very negative things in their life, how do they die? Look at Mao Zedong and also Hitler. We hear about how they were so terrified at the point of death, pleading with their doctors, is there nothing you can do to prolong my life, to save me? And Hitler, he ended up taking his own life, right? She's talking about, I think, a Taliban leader or more recently, very powerful leader who, when eventually they were caught by the army and about to be shot to death, they were pleading out, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. Such a ferocious, seemingly fearless man who had killed, without a second thought, thousands of other people. But when it comes to his own death, he's absolutely petrified. Absolutely petrified. So, except for those sublime accomplished beings who have attained accomplishment and attained mastery over death, all the rest of us will be overcome by fear at the time of death. All those who have really taken the practice to heart and are able to die at peace with a smile on their faces, everyone else, all the rest of us, will die overcome by fear, wetting ourselves in fear, shitting ourselves in fear, quite literally. Utterly alone, you will have no one to accompany you as you leave this world behind and go to the world beyond. You will enter a great darkness, fall into a great abyss. Even if you have a great circle of friends or entourage, what have you, you cannot take any of them with you. Like a strand of hair being pulled out of blood butter, you have to go completely alone. You will make the great change of abode. So you will. The great change of abode, which means moving from the abode of this life to the unknown abode of the next, leaving everything behind. You will enter a great enshrouding darkness. You will travel through a great wilderness, be carried away in a great ocean. Carried away in a great ocean, with no control whatsoever, blown by the wind of your past deeds, proceeding onward with no place to halt or rest, with no control or say about where you are being taken to. You will go onto a great battlefield, be seized by terrible negative forces and banished into space. So you'll go onto a great battlefield, like these days. I think she's talking about the soldiers fighting in the Russian and Ukraine war. In the past, it might have been that if you joined the army and went into battle, maybe 25% of the soldiers would be killed, but 75% might survive. And once you'd survived once, you wouldn't have to go into battle again. But these days, if you join the army, even if you survive the first battle you go into, you're then given a bit of time to rest, but you're sent. You're not then excused from the army, right? You're sent back into battle again and again. Basically, as long as you're alive, you're sent back into battle again and again. So there's just no way out of it. Eventually, you will die on the battlefield. You'll be seized by terrible negative forces and banished into space. Your father and mother, brothers and sisters will gather around you, and as you breathe your last, they'll say, "Let's divide up his fortune." So that's very unfortunate. But these days, families are scattered all over the place. People's children have gone over to the West, living far away from their parents, or the parents are put into an old people's home and die there. So when people die, they're not even in the same place as their family, right? Sons and daughters let their parents die alone. In the past, we were very poor and in material terms lived very simple lives, but at least families stuck together, and old men and women didn't have to die alone and so on. These days, everyone's much richer and lives much more comfortably in material terms. But what's the use if people are so scattered and can't help each other, basically? What's the use in having owning 3 or 4 houses, owning tens and dozens of fields? One time I stood on the top of a house and I looked out over the valley at all the buildings and fields, and I imagined that these are all my houses, I'm the owner of all of this. It really wasn't pleasant. I imagined going into each and every house. Really, what can you do with so many houses? Just spend your time going into one house, out of the other house, into the next house, out of it, into another one. There's no benefit whatsoever in having all this kind of wealth, having more than one house. For instance, or owning an entire monastery. What's the use of that? Just spend your time going from one monk's room to the other. There's no benefit to this kind of material wealth at all. No essence to it whatsoever. And these days we see this happen all the time, chasing after material wealth, thinking I need to earn money and have this and that. Then couples separate, like a husband goes off to America to work and abandons their wife, or the other way around, and so on. There's no benefit or meaning to any of this. So their hair in disarray, they'll weep, alas my father, alas my mother, alas my child. Your only friends will be your deeds of generosity, ascetic practice, and the Dharma. Those will be the only things that help you. So above we had this line, you'll wish you could practice some charity, right? Because charity and so on can help you at the time of death. Generosity and the like are your only friends. Apart from the Dharma, you will have no other refuge, no other protector, no other friends to support you. So these words that we're reading through, these are the words of Buddha Shakyamuni. You should keep this in mind. These are not the words of just any old person. These are the words of Buddha himself. He says, great king, at that time the Dharma will be an island, a shelter, a protector, and a guide. It's only the Dharma that will help you at this time. We could actually tell some nice stories, some pertinent stories here about how one takes refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma, how they grant protection and so on. So there's this story of how there's a father, a son in Kham. The father chanted the prayer to be reborn in Buddha Amitabha's Puram Sukhavati every day, and his son said, Dad, this Buddha Amitabha that you pray to, what does he look like? And the father didn't really know. It seems actually Buddha Amitabha is red in colour, but he said, I think he's this blue Buddha. I think he's this blue Buddha, and he will come at the time of death, and so on. And so the father mistakenly thought Buddha Amitabha was blue and told his son that. Later on, he died. He was on his deathbed with the same son beside him. And he almost died. He basically passed away, entered the bardo for a second, but then he came back to life, as sometimes happens. We call this delok in Tibetan. So he woke up, he kind of revived, and he called out to his son, my son, I was wrong, Buddha Amitabha, he's not blue, he's red. So through the power of this man's supplications, and meditations on Buddha Amitabha, when he reached the point of death, Buddha Amitabha really did, just as he'd supplicated and prayed, actually come and greet him and guide him to the pure realms. So he had a vision of Buddha Amitabha and then said to his son, my son, I saw Buddha Amitabha, he's not actually blue, he's red. So this just shows, if you pray and supplicate to the Buddhas, Buddha Amitabha and so on, and make these sorts of prayers to be reborn in their pure realms, even if you do it without much understanding, without knowing, what the Buddha looks like, what the specific Buddha you're praying to looks like, what color they are, what they hold in their hands, still through the power of the blessings and compassion of these Buddhas, they will come and greet one and embrace one at the point of death and lead you to their pure realms. So it just shows making such prayers and supplications are extremely meaningful and important. We shouldn't belittle their importance. Likewise, we have the tradition of Lama dances that are performed in the monasteries. We shouldn't mistakenly think that these are just forms of entertainment. These are not just shows. These are actually extremely beneficial for us to watch these dances being done. It familiarizes ourselves with the appearance of the deities that will appear at the time of death in the bardo, the peaceful and wrathful deities that will manifest. So there's profound reasons why we perform these Lama dances, and indeed like at monasteries like Mining Monastery, Lamas will make prostrations to the dancers, present them with katas and so on, because of what they represent. So these Lama dances are not just a form of entertainment or something like that. They actually stem from the profound wisdom of the Tantras, in which the deities, the manifestation of the deities, the appearance of the peaceful and wrathful deities are taught. And this is the manifestation of the deities is then enacted by means of these Lama dances. So Khenpa Daso Rinpoche would speak about this. Great King, though you wash your body like this and so on, you perfume it, drape it with sweet-smelling flowers, you eat delicious food, and all of that. But none of it will help when you die. There's nothing to be done. You have to give up all of these things. You'll be given up by the doctors, abandoned by everything, and you will die in mental anguish. So some more discussion about the meaning of these specific vocabulary used here, but the meaning anyway is very clear in our English translation. At this point you'll be given up by the doctors and abandoned by everything, and you will die in mental anguish. Likewise, Great King, though you wash your body like this, anoint and perfume it and so on. So now we're on page 86. So it says here, you may clothe your body with fine garments of silk and Benares muslin. So someone from Limi told me that there is in India a shawl made of some fabric that is so fine and extraordinary that can be folded up and fit into a matchbox. But when you unfold it, it's a large shawl, soft and warm. So I don't know if that's really true. But anyway, there are these kinds of very fine, special cloths. You might clothe your body in such expensive, excellent clothing, but on your deathbed, nevertheless, you will die wearing soiled clothes and depart alone and naked. Even if you dress in brocades, still on your deathbed, you will die, and you will depart alone and naked. Great king, you might take delight in various forms and sensual enjoyment, but they will all be forsaken. You might take delight in various forms of sensual enjoyment, like beautiful sights, beautiful sounds, beautiful textures, but they will all be forsaken at the time of death. You will die deriving no satisfaction from sensual pleasure. Just as it said in the way of a bodhisattva, sense pleasures are like salt water. The more you engage with them, the more you partake of them, the more your thirst increases. They bring no satisfaction. Yesterday I asked everyone to, if they bring their shoes into the hall, to bring them in plastic bags, right, out of respect, and just to stop filling the hall with the smell of shoes, the smelly smell of feet and shoes. So today it's much better, isn't it? I can't see any bare shoes. I also can't see any shoes in bags. So maybe actually everyone's still wearing their shoes. That would be very cunning. It's a joke. Great king, your home may be filled with incense, so on, and cushioned couches like you see with these fancy Indian homes where they have these like seats with bolsters on the, we call them bolsters or pillows on the back, on the right or left, so whichever way you lean you have something to like rest your body on. These sorts of comfortable couches to right and left on which to recline. So in Libya and other places there are lots of sacred sites where Guru Mshin, Khandri Sogyal and so on said to have gone. There are sacred charnel grounds there. As it says here, a great charnel ground. So there are some sacred charnel grounds with really blessed sites, and we went there and we did Chö there, practiced severance there, and people said, oh, you need to spend a night there, so we did that. There was a stone in the charnel ground that was just covered with grease and encrusted blood and so on, just like horrific to look at. Really revolting, like it just was nauseating, the smell and sight of this. As it says here, a charnel ground full of crows, foxes, and nauseating human corpses. So this is the point. This charnel ground was a very blessed place, but absolutely nauseating. Just could not stay there for so long. The smell and everything was not easy. It wasn't so much that I was afraid, but it was the smell of the grease and so on was just nauseating. Anyway, maybe I accumulated some merit from staying there. I did stay put, even though it was nauseating. I spent the night there and did Chö there. So this was about nauseating human corpses in the charnel ground. So if I was staying, say, in a morgue or something where there were 100 corpses, but in coffins or what have you, that wouldn't pose any problem. But it was the nauseating smell in this charnel ground was quite challenging. So anyway, this word nauseating made me think of that experience. But the charnel ground, these ancient charnel grounds, these old charnel grounds, are incredibly blessed, sacred places. Some of them are very blessed places. So there are some charnel grounds, really enormous charnel grounds, where sort of hundreds of bodies are brought a day. I think Rinpoche said Sera charnel ground, somewhere in Tibet. I've been to charnel grounds like that, and they are somehow not nauseating at all. So it depends. Great King, you may be mounted on the backs of elephants and horses and take delight in the sweet sounds of different musical instruments. With victory banners and parasols raised and so on, you proceed, watched and glorified. But before very long you will die in your bed and be born by 4 people. Your body will be borne aloft by 4 people, your father, mother, brothers and so on, holding their hands aloft and beating their breasts, overwhelmed by grief. So if you're carrying the corpse for a longer distance, then often in Tibet anyway, and around here the corpse might be strapped onto a yak or a horse, and that animal will help carry the corpse to the charnel ground or what have you. In some places in Tibet there's this wonderful tradition of, if you use a yak or an animal to carry a corpse to, say, one's relative's corpse to a charnel ground, once the animal has done that, then the animal is retired. It's never used again for work. Taken out through the southern gate of the city, you'll be buried in a wasteland or devoured by crows and so on. And your bones will be burned in a fire, thrown into a river, or buried underground. So corpses are disposed of in different ways, right? Cremated or thrown in the water. So if doing things according to the Vajrayana, then usually cremates a body, burns the body in fire, combined with a fire puja, fire offering. A really wonderful way of doing it is a sky burial. Sky burial, so the corpse is fed to the vultures and so on, and the remainders of the body decompose into the ground and actually fertilize the ground, and from that a lot of trees and vegetation can grow. So one's body, sky burial, in a sky burial the corpse becomes nourishment for animals and also for the land, which is really wonderful. Anyway, reduced to dust by the wind, sun and rain, you will decompose, scattered in every direction. Great King, thus are all compounded phenomena impermanent, thus are they inconstant. They are just like illusions and dreams, they have no lasting substance. Reflect deeply on this again and again, and having recognized that none of the activities of this life can help you, make an effort day and night to practice the sublime Dharma. So, whoever you are, all of us are heading for only one destination, and that is death. Nothing can help you avoid death. So, like Elon Musk, who's helping Trump, and is spending billions and billions of dollars sending rockets and so on, spaceships up to Mars and places, trying to find if there are other environments where people might be able to live. But even if there's another planet that they find where people can go and live, it's not going to change anything. Even if you're living on your Mars, you still have just one fate. Your fate is death. At the end of the day, everyone has to die, no matter where you live. And of course, us humans, with technology and we have destroyed our own worlds, right? With pollution and rubbish, overusing our resources. And now as a result we have global warming, climate change. We've turned our world into a dustbin. So my request to be Elon Musk, if I could meet him, was instead of spending all this money and resources trying to find an environment on Mars or what have you, please turn your attention to cleaning up our world for the sake of future generations. That would be my request to him. That's what I would say to him if I were to meet him, if he were to become my student. It's unlikely I'll ever get to speak to Elon Musk though, but if I could, that's what I would say to him. I would join my palms together and say, please don't focus on Mars and all these other things. Please focus on this world, on cleaning up our world for this and future generations. But no matter what we do, it seems that all the so-called improvements that us humans make actually end up just destroying our own environment. Our water, our air is polluted. For instance, these cars, which is meant to be a helpful good thing, create so much air pollution, and so on and so forth. Noise pollution, air pollution from cars and planes. And this disturbs people's peace of mind. Noise pollution. So we have air pollution, water pollution, which just pollutes the external environment, but then noise pollution, which actually pollutes our state of mind, right? Which makes people unhappy, ill at ease, which means people cannot rest, cannot relax. So if we could all cultivate some contentment, then that would help, wouldn't it? But we seem unable to have contentment, and with electricity and all of this and that, we just end up polluting our own environment. If we don't change the way we do things, even if Elon Musk and what have you find a new environment, a hospitable environment in Mars or somewhere, and move lots of people up there, well, sooner or later, Mars or whatever will end up just like this world, polluted, destroyed. If we don't change the way that we do things, then yeah, we'll end up turning whatever environment we have into an inhospitable environment, right? She's talking about Taj Mahal. Some of you have seen Taj Mahal. It's an extraordinary structure, architectural structure with moats and so on. Built with so much thought and foresight by this king. With moats and boundary walls and so on, so that the palace was pretty much impenetrable by enemies. In Truma and the Trodikali practice, we visualize a boundary wall with many layers, kind of like that. There was also hot water, there was kind of natural air conditioning, so that one could be cool in the summer and warm in the winter. This was built about 500 or 600 years ago, and still it remains. It's an extraordinary building. Surpasses anything that is built these days, built by one of the ancient kings of India. Such an impressive accomplishment and left behind such a legacy, but he himself also died, right? He died, disappeared off the face of the earth. So no matter how powerful or impressive you are when alive, you will die. It doesn't make any difference. So these days some people might think, have a lot of horses or a certain amount of wealth and sort of puff them up with pride, thinking, oh, they're so I'm so rich, I'm so wealthy. But honestly, compare yourself to someone like this king of India who built Taj Mahal. Your wealth is nothing in comparison. But anyway, regardless of what wealth you have, whether you have wealth or not, all of it has to be left behind. Whatever you have has to be left behind at the time of death. You have to go on alone. So this is, we're now looking at the second reflection, the fact that one's possessions cannot help one. So all of this was about that. No matter how much wealth you have, it cannot help you. You have to leave it behind when you die. So now we're on the top of page 87. All the treasures of the rich will all have to be left behind. There is no one from the past up till now who has been able to take even a handful of the wealth that they have when they die. Recently, someone, a very wealthy man, I think she said from the Middle East, his name was Rajendra, anyway, passed away. He was an incredibly wealthy man. He owned factories that made everything from, she said, vehicles to toothpicks. Incredibly wealthy man. But he too died just recently. And we have Bill Gates, who's quite elderly. Sooner or later he too will die, in spite of his wealth and power. In spite of his wealth. So we shouldn't worry too much about accumulating a lot of wealth. As long as you have a roof over your head and enough food to fill your stomach and get by, that's enough really. Even if you do accumulate a lot of wealth, it really doesn't make any difference, because sooner or later you will die, and at death you have to leave it all behind. So don't get too fixated about becoming rich. Money does not help, material wealth does not help a single bit at the moment of death. It can do nothing to help you whatsoever. So likewise, the gods sweet nectar their finest clothes of 5-colored silk, and so on. Beautiful food endowed with 100 tastes, 100 flavors. We talk about food endowed with 100 tastes, like the most delicious food. There are 18 different dishes of Tibetan cuisine. But even if you have all of these things, even if you have the food of the gods to eat, when it comes to the moment of death, none of it can help you. You can't take it with you, it doesn't help you. There's a story about the food with 100 tastes that, in connection with one time when Yangtang Rinpoche was doing a Gana Chakra offering, but anyway, we won't tell that story now. Constantly these beings are caught and snared. So you have this sutra, a quotation from the Sutra of Extensive Play. These are the words of Buddha. Like a monkey caught in a hunter's net, to those who delight in the senses, much harm will come. Or like an animal caught in a snare. Those who delight in the senses, to them much harm will come. Those who are rich, wealthy, they actually have more danger, are faced with more danger, more harm. More thieves, more burglars, more people trying to attack them and steal from them. These quotations are so blessed and so precious, but we just don't have time to go through them in detail. Though we be rich in worldly goods, delighting in our wealth for many years, despoiled and stripped as though by thieves, we must go naked and with empty hands. Now we come to the next reflection, reflecting that one's relatives and friends cannot help one. At death, the relatives and friends with whom we are connected will be of no help to us. Even if we are surrounded by, as it says here, beautiful young goddess consorts, 1,000 godling children, divine children, a wonderful husband, a beautiful wife, what have you, nephews and uncles. They might be the lords of the gods, and so on. So we're on page 88 now. So she quoted a line from a song, a local song that says something like that. Uncles who are the lords of the gods, but even if they are, it's of no help. Your paternal uncle might be Brahma himself, but at the time of death, none of this helps. It's of no use whatsoever. None of them can keep us alive, provide help, prolong our life, escort or accompany us. We have to depart alone, like a hare plucked out of butter, and proceed along the narrow defile of the intermediate state, with no one to accompany us. A hare plucked out of butter, it's a Tibetan example that we use. So people churn butter, right? And often it's one or two hairs fall into the butter, right? Like a hair of the cow or yak or whatever. But you can pull a strand of hair out of butter and the strand comes out completely clean, right? So with no butter on it, it just comes out completely clean. So this is what it means here when it says you leave like a strand of hair pulled out of butter. It means you leave and depart completely on your own with no one or nothing to accompany you. So this is a Tibetan example that might not translate to a Western audience if not explained. There was, when Keith Damon was translating my book in the past, The Great Secret of the Mind, he didn't understand, he wasn't familiar with this example, and he said, Westerners will misunderstand this, we need to kind of update the example for Western audience and say instead of buttered chocolate or something, but there was no chocolate in Tibet. Anyway, the meaning of this example is, a hair plucked out of butter is just as explained. You will have to proceed along the narrow defile of the intermediate state with no one to accompany you. So these next quotations from the sutras are all the words of Buddha, the teachings of Buddha himself. These words, these quotations from which I just read through, are so blessed and rich with meaning. There's so much we could say. We could actually spend the whole afternoon explaining just these lines from Buddhist sutras, but we don't have that time. Physical courage and agility are of no use. At the time of death, we have to depart with nothing to help us, and so on. So Rinpoche is reading through the bottom of page 88. So listen to the sound of that airplane flying above. That's noise pollution disturbing us. As we read in the Vinaya scriptures here, even mighty long-lived gods living in their lofty abodes, their lives exhausted, will grow weak, so who today can escape from death? So here, Dushan Rinpoche has already explained all of these points about the imminence and inescapability of death. But then he's also ornamenting his explanation with these quotations from the scriptures, right? These scriptural quotations are called supportive scriptural quotations. Supportive because it's like the author saying, okay, if you don't believe what I say, if you're not convinced, then read this quotation. Read these words of the Buddha himself. The Buddha himself said these things, or the masters themselves said these things. So hence they're called supportive scriptural quotations. Now we're reading through page 89. So, even mighty beings, no matter how much might and power beings might have, like great warriors or extraordinary warriors, still it is of no help. No matter how strong you might be, your physical strength is powerless to stop death. Making use of the numerous illustrations and arguments mentioned above, in everything you do, think only of death and recognize everything you see, hear and think of as impermanent by nature, as an example of impermanence, and so on. So, when you think of the teachers, the great masters of the past, Jetsun Milarepa, Khyentse Dushan Rinpoche, those with faith in our tradition, in our Namkha Kyungsung tradition, the late Shiva Rinpoche and so on, Rinpoche mentioned other lamas, even these sublime accomplished beings, they passed away, right? So whatever it is, we should take it as a reminder of impermanence. Then we have these, now on page 90, we have these lines of from the great omniscient one, Longchenpa. As you walk, every step you take is impermanent, an incitement to move toward Buddhahood. So, we're reading through these lines. When you rise, standing is impermanent, an incitement to arise into the state of evenness, a state of profound emptiness or evenness. Eating, drinking, your tsampa, your noodle soup, your momos, whatever. These activities are impermanent, an incitement to eat the food of concentration, the food of samadhi. When you eat to eat the food of samadhi, which dispels all hunger. All dwellings are impermanent, an incitement to reside in the palace of evenness, the absolute body, or the Dhammakaya. Drawing in your limbs is impermanent, an incitement to withdraw from compounded activities. So some of you have maybe very sore knees or legs. Those who do have pain in their knees or legs, if they really do have that pain or have problems with their legs, then it's okay. One is permitted then, even in a Dharma teaching, to stretch one's legs out, or for instance to sit on a seat instead of sitting on the floor. As Buddha said, out of respect, one should sit on the floor with one's legs crossed when receiving teachings. But for those who are sick, then there is an exemption, right? And there is no fault then, no negative karma then in someone stretching out their legs or sitting up on a chair if they are doing so because they're sick, likewise with wearing a hat or what have you. But if one is not sick and nevertheless does these things out of disrespect or carelessness, then there is a negative karma, right? There is a shortcoming in that. For instance, even when one is sick, if one's sick and one takes medicine, one should take that medicine thinking this medicine is the activity, the compassionate activity of the Buddhas. Anyway, these points will be explained more when we come to refuge. So I say this because there are some people who are sitting with their legs stretched out or with their head covered or what have you, as if they're sick. Hopefully they really are sick. I mean, not hopefully, but if they really are sick, then there's no problem there. But if they are not really unwell, then that conduct is a shortcoming, it's negative. So lying down is impermanent, an assignment to take rest in the way things truly are. So to rest, to really sleep or rest in luminosity is very challenging, but at the point when one goes to sleep, one should supplicate the Guru like Avalokiteshvara, visualize them dissolving into one. And then when you're lying down to sleep, breathing in and out, you should visualize the mantras like the Mani mantra, resounding in and out as you breathe in and out, or the Vajraguru mantra. This really helps. It really helps also when going to sleep. So keep the deity in mind, the mantra in mind, whether it be the Mani mantra, Vajraguru mantra, Amideva, what have you. There's enormous virtue in that, and also it sets your sleep up to be virtuous, so the whole period of time you're sleeping and resting becomes virtuous. And then if you wake up suddenly, then this will also, you might find that immediately you wake up and your mind immediately goes to the mantra, and your sleep, that period of sleep continues. It's just a stream of virtue. And that might be challenging, but it's we should try. We should definitely try to turn our sleep into virtuous activity as well in that way. When you travel, the way is impermanent, and excitement is set out on the path to enlightenment. So when we sleep, actually going back to sleep, it's quite challenging. We talk about in the Great Perfection context, like as Longchenpa taught, to rest, to sleep with one's mind in a state of luminosity. But then when you really try and maintain the state of practice while sleeping, it's difficult to actually fall asleep. You actually don't fall asleep. So I wondered about this, and I asked Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche about this. I think this is a very important, helpful point for practitioners. So when teaching the 3 vital points, Rinpoche explained this. So I said I really have difficulties with this sleeping in luminosity, either mingling with luminosity and falling asleep. I cannot actually sleep. Either the way I'm merging with luminosity isn't correct, or I don't know. And then in Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche's teachings on the 3 vital points, Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche explained, actually, when you rest in luminosity, you cannot fall asleep. You do not fall asleep, because luminosity is wisdom. Wisdom is the opposite of ignorance. Sleep is a state of ignorance. Luminosity is a state of wisdom, a lack of ignorance. These are direct opposites. So how is it possible to fall asleep when you are maintaining a state of luminosity? You cannot have ignorance where you have awareness, right? You cannot have awareness or wisdom where there's ignorance. So the difference between samsara and nirvana is said to be awareness or lack of awareness, right? Ignorance or wisdom. That's the dividing line. So if you are maintaining luminosity, then you will not fall asleep. You will not fall into a state of ignorance. But then, do we not need to sleep and get that kind of rest? So we might fall asleep, and when we lie down to sleep, then mingle our minds with the luminosity, maintain that state, and then slowly we do fall into a state of sleep. So that state of sleep is still a state of ignorance, but it's still kind of touched, has this positive influence, a positive touch of luminosity. So it's establishing a very positive habit. If you sleep in that way, when you first lie down to sleep, you rest in luminosity, and you actually might not sleep deeply at all. You might not really have the sense that you actually slept or had any deep sleep. But even if you don't fall into sleep, proper deep sleep, by maintaining the state of luminosity through the night, you will be refreshed just by that. You won't feel tired and fatigued like you do if after an ordinary kind of night of no sleep. So we all need to try. When we lie down to sleep, we should be mindful and practice before going to sleep, so that we establish a positive habit, a positive state of mind, a positive habit in one of these ways, so that the whole stretch of our sleep and rest through the night becomes virtuous. Otherwise, if you go to sleep just mindlessly thinking of your last thoughts before you sleep, like of business or this and that, then you're going to be kind of thinking those thoughts throughout your sleep, in your dreams and so on, and just reinforcing those habits. So reading through the rest of page 90. Wealth and possessions are impermanent, and incitement to accumulate the 7 noble riches. As it says in the Sampanyudruma prayer to Guru Mshe, the 7 riches of faith, study, faith, discipline and study, and so on. These are the 7 noble riches. The greatest greatest wealth, we could say, is to be endowed with the wealth of discipline. So to uphold the monastic vows purely, that is, makes you much richer than someone with an expensive car or house. Likewise, if you're endowed with genuine faith, that makes you richer than someone with material wealth. These 7 riches of noble beings are these qualities of faith, understanding, discipline, and so on. We need to understand what is genuine rich, what are genuine riches, what is genuine wealth. It's these noble qualities. So cultivate wealth, maintain your discipline purely, practice generosity. Then you will be truly rich. Power and fame are impermanent, incitement to constant humility, pleasure is impermanent, and so on. An incitement to accumulate merit and wisdom. Sentient beings are impermanent. All sentient beings, we should think, sentient beings, all of these sentient beings are my parents, my mother, my father. I must establish all of these kind sentient mother beings at the level of enlightenment, and to that end I will practice the Dhamma, I will recite this money mantra, and so on. The causes of sudden death are impermanent. Incitement to see the citadel of deathlessness, the innate state. And we need to aim to accomplish the innate state of deathlessness. Washing and grooming yourself are impermanent. An incitement to use the 4 powers to purify your defilements and obscurations. The 4 powers which are typically taught and applied during the practice of Vajrasattva. The power of support, of regret, of the application of the remedy, and of commitment. These 4 powers combined will purify asava defilements and obscurations. The 5 afflictive emotions are impermanent, an incitement to realize spontaneous primal wisdom. the world you perceive as impermanent, and so on. So these words, these instructions of Longchenpa, are ways to encourage us to make use of every aspect of our daily lives, right? To use all aspects of our daily lives, our experience, as a reminder, as an entreatment, an incitement. Actually, when we think about it in this way, the practice of the Dharma is so easy. We always, at every moment, we have the chance to practice the Dharma. We always have the chance to practice the Dharma right there in the palm of our hands. Just sitting here, just sitting wherever we are, we can have the pure perception that sees all beings around us as deities, male and female, the environment as the pure realm of the Buddhas, and so on. That itself is practice, right? There's no need to think, oh, I don't have this specific circumstance, I'm not in a retreat hut, I don't have this ritual items with me, and therefore I can't practice right now. Every opportunity is a ripe opportunity for practice. Thoughts and memories are impermanent, and incitement to develop the wisdom of elimination and realization. Now we have the fault in not meditating on impermanence. The fault basically is that failure to act on impermanence prevents us from becoming a genuine practitioner. No matter who we are, layperson, monastic, tulku, ngapa, old lama, kempo, professor, what have you, if you don't take impermanence to heart, Geshe-ma, what have you, if you don't take impermanence to heart, none of these titles mean anything. None of it is any use. If you don't take impermanence to heart, even if you have some fancy Dharma title like Tulku, Kempo, what have you, you will never engage in Dharma actually. You'll only be engaging in mundane deeds. Without taking impermanence to heart, you will never actually engage in the Dharma. You'll never turn away from mundane concerns. Having been dominated exclusively by the things of this life, all we're likely to have achieved is some profit, fame, and so on. Nothing else. So even if we, and it's as if some short-lived Dharma practice, like even if we chant the money mantra and so on, if we do it without having reflected on impermanence, then it will not be real practice, it will just be like a show. We won't be liberated from psychic existence very quickly that way. So reading through these lines on page 91, as Jetsun Milarepa said, it's through my diligence that I attained enlightenment, it's through your laziness that you remain in samsara. So if even ordinary tasks can't be accomplished by doing them only occasionally, there's no need to mention accomplishing liberation and enlightenment. Without diligence and perseverance, there's no way to attain liberation and enlightenment. By applying himself with diligence to practice, then Jetsun Milarepa, he attained realization, he purified all discards and obscurations, and manifested the state of enlightenment replete with the marks and signs. In Jetsun Milarepa's life story, we see one of his students, Rechumpro, another one of his students, said, "Oh Milarepa, my precious Guru, when we look at your life story and the effort you put in, the trials you underwent, no ordinary being could possibly undergo the hardships you underwent. You must without doubt be the emanation of a bodhisattva or some Buddha. It's not possible that you started out as an ordinary being." Milarepa replied, "Well, what you've just said is kind of good in terms of your pure perception, but actually there is no greater denigration of the Dharma. You have denigrated the Dharma in saying what you just said. If you apply yourself to the Dharma, then you can transform yourself just like I did. You can start out as an ordinary being and attain enlightenment in one single life. The reason most ordinary beings don't is because they are ensnared by laziness and they fail to they fail to master diligence. If you apply yourself with diligence, then anyone can turn themselves around and attain enlightenment." So we find this profound teaching in Milarepa's life story. So it says here, enlightened beings like Dipankara and Shakyamuni, that they began as sentient beings just like us, but by the strength of the diligence they became Buddhas. We've never given rise to diligence, so we're still wandering in samsara. Countless Buddhas have come in the past, and subsequently passed into nirvana, but we were not the objects of their healing activities. So we continue to wander endlessly in psychic existence. The very fact that we're here now, encountering the Dharma, exposed to the Dharma with this opportunity, shows that we must have had some brief encounter at least with the teachings of the Buddhas in the past, with Buddha Shakyamuni or Gurumshe. Maybe we were an animal, or we just had some brief encounter with them, right? And as a result of that connection, we are now here with the opportunity, with a connection to the profound Dharma. This is really how it goes. So I'm always looking to my left. Now I'm going to turn myself to the right and speak to the people on my right. In the past, there was a pigeon, or some kind of, there was a pigeon who was alive in India. And although they had no notion, as a pigeon, they had no notion of the Dharma being precious or anything, but they happened to live around a cave or place where, I think it was Vasubandhu, was teaching the Abhidhamma, when a master was teaching the Abhidhamma and other Dhamma teachings. So every day they just heard these teachings, right? They had no idea of the preciousness or value of them or the meaning, but they heard them. Through that contact with those teachings, the habituation to hearing them, then in their next life they were born as a human and became a great upholder of the teachings. So this is the power of karma and connections. So who knows how we encountered the Dhamma in the past, in what form, in what life. What was the cause for us ending up here with this connection to the Dhamma? Like think of Lachampe Masal, the princess, the daughter of King Trison Detsen, who actually was born as his daughter as a result of his karmic debt. She was the rebirth of an insect that in a past life he had accidentally killed. Through that connection, karmic connection, she was born as his son, as Princess Lachampe Masal, and encountered Gurumshe, received teachings from Gurumshe, and in the future she actually took rebirth as great masters such as Longchenpa. And when you look at the lives of other masters as well, you can see that in their past lives they came from very strange places, like from strange karmic connections, good and bad both. So this likewise must be the case for all of us in terms of our karmic connections from past lives with the teachings. It's important to reflect on all this and be guided on the path to liberation now in this present life. This life is like a short-term loan, so reflect on impermanence and apply yourself sincerely to practicing the essential Dharma, for it is set in the way of the Bodhisattva. From this day forth, if I now fail to strive, and so on, if I continue to behave like this, I will suffer pains and bondage, wounds and laceration in the lower realms. So now we're at the top of page 92. We dedicate the merit and stop here for today.
On te jamba danda lele je deba degan yan jambe yange zave jasone tancho nyambo ren lon zenche basarwan de son gombo jambe yan tuje gonje je shane yan jinge